Welcome back, everybody, to Plato's Academy. I'm excited to pick up from our previous cliffhanger, right? I was kind of getting my philosophical ball rolling in my head, right? But we thought, hey, we'll just pause there.
We'll
pick up later. Nick put the kibosh on it because he just can't handle it.
Can't handle
and
the
so
truth.
I'm interested in what I want to do is I want to pick up where we're at. I want to try to explain where we're at. And if that makes sense to you, then I know it'll make sense to them and you all in the audience. And so let me pick up where I think we are at.
Okay.
So I tried to, we talked about sort of new polity and what that is and these like theories and liberalism and I'm a liberal conservative, all that. And I got to going off in theory. And then I said, well, you raised the question, which everybody raises to help learn about the theory is to see, how do I live it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the right question to ask.
Me
How
too.
do you live it out?
Me too.
That helps you find the sort of living principles, which we philosophers are trying to abstractly talk about.
Yes.
Right. So that's a good question. That's not a dumb question. And then we had a time where I was asking you how you live it out, how you live out those very principles, and maybe that would help illustrate. And we wanted to make a caveat that we're not prescribing the agrarian lifestyle, but we're using that as a great illustration. And then I tried to introduce what is it an illustration of? It's an illustration of what McIntyre calls a social practice. So whether you're doing flower gardening, building a gazebo, running, using vegetables
Keeping
and transforming
bees,
them, keeping bees,
pigs.
those are all very different practices which have their own history of knowledge. How do you beekeep? There's a knowledge. You talk to other beekeepers, right? You learn from books, right? And each one of these complex social practices requires humans to develop human ethical virtues like trust, justice, right? The standards of fairness when you're judging different products. Did you do a good job or not do a good job? The objectivity of truth. You're learning truthfulness, trust. These are central to the possibility of doing a practice.
Yeah.
And so then I said, well, those social practices make up the very sort of fabric, the threads in the fabric of our society. And so, but how do you sustain a practice through time? Because it takes resources, right? It takes money. It takes donors, right? It takes effort. So it takes external goods, organization. So the external goods, which sustain the practice through time, form an institution, the institutionalization of the practice. Think of like art clubs, right? Which have membership dues to sustain the knowledge of how to do calligraphy, right? Or how to keep bees or whatever.
Yeah.
And so these institutions seem to be required in human life to sustain practices and make them long living. So the more practices that you sustain, the more you bring tradition to bear. The more tradition is brought to bear, the more knowledge of living human life is brought to bear in the current culture. The Catholic Church calls that inheritance, right? Which is, to use a dumb phrase, but it's popular, it's like social capital, cultural capital, human capital. That is this knowledge that tradition contains, okay? And so one of the ones I wanted to zero in on is one that takes us from your illustrations of you and your family, right? Doing certain practices with your family, like talking about how canning tomatoes is something that can build sort of virtues and responsibilities for your kids and to bond your wife and your kids and your family together. And go from that to how do families bond together, right? And then when families bond together,
One family with another family.
Yeah, Aristotle called the union of families pursuing some common good a village. That was his term.
Okay.
And then when enough of those come together, you form a bigger community with more people, more families, which he called the polis, right? The political community. That's the community of the ideal size, right? That pursues the deepest human goods. What we want to call culture.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm seeing this theoretically, and I want to talk to you about what we too think is one of the most important practices in human society. Right, and that's the practice of education, because that brings together families, right? And so is a massive culture-building force or practice.
Yes.
And I was bringing up the fact that the public institution of education has corrupted the practice of education such that in many public schools, university or high school or even below, real education or the practice of education isn't even happening. Something else is occurring. Indoctrination, right? Glorified babysitting, whatever you want to call it, right? And so it's not really education. And so I wanted to talk to you about your experience in both homeschooling, right? Sort of homeschool co-ops, and then ultimately the institution of the Chesterton Academy, and to talk about how education builds culture and how that works. Do you see kind of where I was going?
Okay. I do see where you're going. I think you logically explained that really well.
Thank you. I try to be as concise as possible.
And if not, I suppose you can, if people are listening, if you listeners want to hit back, I guess you can hit back. Back button. I don't know, but I thought that was good.
Okay. You understand. Okay.
I do.
So tell me about your experience with homeschooling. Why is homeschooling so valuable? Right? Why is the co-op that you're involved with something you wanted to add or include in that? The co-op idea, which brings together more than one homeschooling, and then the idea of an institution or a school, which is not a homeschool co-op, the Chesterton Academy, right? And of course, I'm involved at a university. Right, so we're all involved with both involved with an institution, and we're both intimately in devoted to the practice, the value of real education.
Yes, which is what we hope Platos Academy is in this online weird way.
Yes,
an extension of. Well, homeschooling. I mean, first of all, I would say, I guess your question is, why do I homeschool? I guess, or why is it good, or what does it do, or what values there are? To me, Katie and I mean, it's not my decision only. It's together that we made a decision to do homeschooling because we felt like it was the best way to pass on the inheritance, as you said. It was the best way that
cultural capital.
And that by best, I don't mean a prescription for everybody else. It was best for us. And we chose to do the co-op because that was best for Katie, which is best for us because that's best for the family. And so some people can do homeschooling without a co-op. And if they do it, and it's actually good homeschooling, awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. If you, as a lot of mothers who are doing homeschooling, typically, not always, but typically, if they need something like, to me, classical conversations,
CC.
It's an institution. It's classical conversations. It's a homeschool curriculum.
That's institutionalized.
It's institutionalized. It's absolutely wonderful. I would highly recommend it if that's something you're looking for that you out there are thinking of, maybe if you're thinking about
not a prescription, but an idea that represents a value.
Something that can work with you that you need to look at in prudence and decide if that's what's best for you. So we did that. And the values that, to me, that gave us a model and goals to make the practices of education in the home very effective. And they did a better job for us than we would have done on our own.
Yes.
So that's why we chose to do that.
So you relied on their injection of human, spiritual, cultural capital.
Yes.
Right. And you invested in that and you got returns.
And here's some examples of some of the inheritance I got from them, which many great people and thinkers have done in educational institutions do. They focus on memory, forming a student's memory. Not just giving them facts to memorize, by giving them lots of facts to memorize, which they do through songs and chants and fun activities. Okay, they learn English grammar, they learn Latin, they learn history sentences and chronology and dates.
So one of the tools of learning is honed, and that tool is memory.
Yes,
I mean, it's hard to plummet how valuable that is in a human life. The perfection of a human life would include the perfection of their memory.
Yes, exactly. Right? So that area that they do a wonderful job at, and to me that did better than we would have done on our own, and that is helping the inheritance because Katie and I are also teaching them the faith, and when their memory is stronger, they'll potentially have a stronger faith too if they choose that because their wills are involved, obviously. So that's why we chose to do that, and that's the value. That's one really specific example. The memory was awesome. And we also do music. That music is separate from CC. CC does not. They teach a basic music notation with what are they called?
Recorders.
Not recorders.
Penny whistles.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Tin whistles.
Okay. Yeah.
Tin whistles.
Got it.
And they teach basic notation. Our kids were past that, but they teach every child that goes through CC, which is that's K through 12. That program CC is K through 12. Is they teach them about musical notation and different things about music, really basic stuff. We also did piano. And so our education homeschooled because Katie and I felt like it would be best. We always thought math, music, and reading. Those were like the basics that we thought. And so they always do those things. But you add CC and then they go. So they do all the work at home.
Can I just pause you for 1 second? That you gave us a lot of food for thought there. So one thing I wanted you to pause and riff on a little bit is music. I think a lot of people in our kind of STEM mentality, which is a public education, they don't think music matters very much. It's sort of like an emotional thing, right?
Something
it's
fun you can do that's kind of a cool hobby.
Right, it's kind of a cool hobby. But can you give me some sort of theological, metaphysical, some sort of profound, right, reason why music is such an important part of education. Maybe give history.
I'll do the best I can in a very short time. And my first thought is, if you believe that people in the past had a lot to say about this kind of thing that was valuable, such as Pythagoras, such as Plato, such as Aristotle, such as any great medieval thinker, such as any one of the founders of our country, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, then you would not think music is an extra.
Yes.
If you just looked at what they said.
And so how does that develop something fundamental to our human capacity? We're talking about eudaimonia.
Yeah.
How is being musical part of flourishing as a human being?
Yeah. To me, that music is the universal language, according to Beethoven. That's a quote by him.
Yeah.
Everybody speaks and listens music. I don't mean English words in pop songs. I mean music as creating sound waves that are harmonic, right? Or a melody.
Ordered,
right? That is something that mirrors nature itself. And
the music of the spheres.
The music of the spheres.
The heavenly spheres.
Yes. Plato said music is what is the soul of the universe.
Yes.
Whoa, that's a big statement. That's profound.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so to me,
the creation of the creation in Tolkien,
music
right?
helps us in our soul get into harmony with itself and with nature.
Because it's an ordering principle.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I guess that would be my most profound answer. Music gets me in harmony with myself and others and nature.
Right.
It also provides wonderful benefits if people, I don't like to say this first because I feel like it makes us not philosophical, but it's a utilitarian. It makes you have a better memory. You do better in math.
Yeah.
You do better. You have
Actually,
better
your
discipline.
corpus callosum is literally
you have
thicker.
a thicker corpus callosum. All that stuff's great arguments, and if people need those too, you can find those really easily.
Yeah.
But to me, music is elemental to music and human existence. If we in heaven, I know there'll be music.
Yes.
I don't know for sure if there'll be pool or basketball. Probably. Right. But I know there'll be music.
Yeah. And I wanted to say just to continue that, I can't really add much to that, but like in the 19th century, when modern philosophy has kind of begun to be post-Christian, right? You got like a famous atheist like Schopenhauer, and then another one like Nietzsche who learns from Schopenhauer, right? For Schopenhauer, who inspired Wagner, right? Music and artistic experience, and he was weirdly trying to riff on Plato, Schopenhauer, on Plato's view of eros, right, and love, right, and beauty as the ladder. Right? Is that ascends to the transcendent. And so aesthetic experience was like an escape from this ugly world.
Mundane,
not mundane, this ugly, wicked world that expresses this underlying will. Right? That's like a wicked
malevolent.
Thing. Yes, a malevolent force. So he was like a deep pessimist about the world, but the only escape was this like detachment from the world into the aesthetic sphere of beauty.
Transcendence through beauty and music into the transcendent.
Music to me is like, and he thought it was, Schopenhauer, like the perfect expression of the beautiful, right? Like it's the perfect art form, right? It's the paradigm one. So if you listen to Wagner, for example, I'm not saying by his philosophy, right? But it has this such power, right? It draws you into the tension and the relaxation, right? And so he's representing these like themes of like death and resurrection continuously, and using like deep mythological themes from Norse mythology and stuff. I'm not buying into this philosophy. I'm just saying it's so powerful. Right. So I just wanted to put a, exclamation point on that point you were bringing up about music being valuable. I think that's central. And of course, in the liberal arts tradition, you have the trivium and the quadrivium. And it doesn't matter what those are exactly, but they're the fundamental arts to learn in education, to go to a higher level of education. And that quadrivium is the
arts,
principles.
It's more like skills.
Kind of, to me, it's like a knowledge that unlocks the way the world is. So the trivium is like what you were talking about, is the tools of learning. But the quadrivium are like the principles of reality itself. Like how does reality go? What explains the order and goings on of the cosmos? Music was one of those studies.
Yes.
Right.
So geometry.
So I didn't mean to go off too far on music, but bring me back.
So homeschooling, that's how Katie and I chose to do homeschooling, because we felt like it did the best to unlock, you said earlier, the potentials of humanity for us in our situation with that particular program, with music also added to it and having our kids do piano because we could do that. That is what we felt was best for them. As they developed, they got to high school, and we had a very healthy conversation, Katie and I, about should we send the children to high school. And I thought it would be a good thing, because I feel like it's another sphere out from the family
village, community.
Community.
Yeah.
And so they becoming, there's a lot of socialization that occurs, and it's a
Yes.
pop word,
Yes.
but I think it is worthy of
Right.
contemplating what that means.
Right.
And it does mean, it is a big part of education
Yeah.
for every young person.
You know what Aristotle would call that? The political,
There you go.
right?
So the political.
Yeah.
So I think
the
that is,
interaction of multiple villages together for
Yeah.
some common cultural value,
Yeah.
right? That's the pursuit of ultimate happiness together.
Yeah.
The unlocking of those potentials.
yeah. And so to me, that's, I guess, where Chesterton came in. I don't know. Is that?
Chesterton Academy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it, where else did you want me to go with that?
So you, okay, you talked about homeschooling and its value. So I wanted to bring it back to practices for a second, then I'll transition to the next one. Right? Is so the when you're doing homeschooling, right, in order for your children to learn the memory, right, the music, all that, they are having to listen, pay attention, do as they're told.
Yes.
Right? Those are like all a moral thing going on.
And
So
attention, I wanted to say attention is one of the most fundamental things.
Yes.
That if you get God and family right,
yes.
attention is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
And look at our educational system now.
Yes.
That's what is corrupting the very process.
Well, exactly.
The kids can't pay attention. I mean,
Yes.
my brother-in-law who's
Yeah.
coaching.
Yep.
He said they can't listen to me explain a play.
Yes.
It's amazing. They
single
can't
play
pay
in
attention
basketball.
for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. And he's really struggling. They're younger. They're like freshmen.
Yes.
But again, attention, it's like a crisis of attention because of the phone.
Yeah. And you know what that
Screen.
is from my philosophical point of view?
Yeah.
The inability to contemplate.
Yes.
So contemplation requires a deliberate sustaining of your attention.
Yes.
Music, to me, extends your ability to pay attention, and it helps you.
Yes.
Because the beauty is like extending
Not
your
only that,
consciousness.
you have to pay attention. That's why
Yes.
so many youth don't want to listen to classical music.
Yes.
They can't pay attention.
No.
They just want immediate dopamine.
Yes.
From a boom Taylor
Yeah.
Swift, whatever. I don't even know.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yes.
That's just, it gets me feeling good right now.
Yes.
And it's nothing wrong
and then-
inherently
yes.
with feeling good with music right
No,
now.
I'm so glad you brought up that notion of attention, because it's one of those words that it sounds like it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
But it actually opens up into a vast vista of philosophical, theological, cultural
Yes.
issues. I
Yeah.
mean, think about what people call the attention economy right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Like the attention economy is like you have YouTube algorithms,
Yeah.
like grabbing your attention,
Yeah.
and pursuing. And so the technium,
Yeah.
as we talk about, controlled in the market system. With now we have social media and these devices and AI involved, right? And it's like extracting our attention,
Yes.
right, and doing it for the sake of what? It's not for the common good.
No.
Right? It's powers and principalities. It's
Yes.
corruption. It's demonic involvement.
Yes.
It's not demonic involvement like, like The Exorcist or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's dragging down your soul to, instead of thinking about higher things and transcendental reality and ultimate significance.
You're scrolling and drooling
Yes.
instead.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, sadly. Very sad.
And so that very environment of home education is creating what I call a moral environment.
Yes.
The moral environment of the children is an atmosphere.
Yes.
Right. In
which
you-
is that
Yes.
atmosphere. So
Yes.
what our Charlotte Mason is on our.
That's where I got it from.
Yeah. Education is a discipline,
Yes.
an atmosphere,
Yes.
a life.
Yes. And so that's those practices.
Yes.
And they're getting caught up into the greater values that are inherited from that capital, that human social capital, right? Of those practices open us up to the beautiful, the true, and the good.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's homeschooling. We haven't even got to culture yet.
But I would want to say
Right?
again, I don't want to be prescriptive
Yes.
because there are grade schools out there.
Yes.
Many classical schools.
Yep.
I would highly recommend classical schools, looking at every school as possible. There's other alternative homeschools too that
There's
are
probably
not
charter
homeschools,
schools,
charter
private
schools,
schools.
Co-ops,
And it is even
Montessori
possible
schools,
that some exceptional public school has that.
Waldorf
That's possible.
schools. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can help
Yes.
unlock that.
Yes.
But it's important that each family understands the importance of developing these human goods.
Yep.
It would be, the biggest mistake would just be to think I can put them in a school and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Without thinking. No, you have to think about your responsibility as a parent. Every parent's responsibility is the education of your child.
Yeah.
You will be judged
Yeah.
by God Almighty
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.